Hey y'all, welcome to How Luther Became Dugan. This is Dugan. I'm Jill. I call him Daddy. But he's going to tell you today how Luther became Dugan. Go for it, Dad.
All right. Well, I don't remember this myself, but this is what I was told by my parents. Um, I I was born out in the county in Guilford County um, on April Fool's Day, 1945. But that same spring, my family and they took me to. I had an older brother and sister, and my mom and dad, but they let me go along with them when they moved from the country into proximity. Uh, Community. It was a mill village near the proximity plant of Cone Mill Corporation, which was a cotton mill, and moved on Cypher Street. We'd lived out on Church Street in the county, and can I tell a little story about what happened to my brother just before I was born?
Sure.
Um, my oldest brother, who was 3 years old at the time, um, we were we didn't have an inside toilet. Her mom and dad did, and I wasn't even born then. My mom was still carrying me, and my mom was fixing supper one night for my dad. He hadn't come home from work, and she was cooking, and she was playing hide and go seek, trying to entertain my older brother, who was 3. And he was hiding, and she would go find him, and then come back, and he would hide again, and she would find him while she was fixing dinner. But then she heard a muffled sound, him calling out in distress, and she goes looking and she can't find him. And finally, she realized that he had fallen in the toilet hole. He had fallen in the privy
Gross.
at the back of the house. Well, Dad wasn't home, so she goes running. There was a guy by the name of Fred. That's my dad's name. But there was a guy younger guy named Fred Setzer. His parents were the people that Mom and Dad rented from. And he was probably a teenager then. And she goes running, she sees him and she yells at him, and he comes and pushes the toilet over, gets down and pulls my brother out, and they get him cleaned up. Now, if he finds out, bless his heart, this may be the cause of his demise. He's almost 84 years old, and this embarrasses him. I probably shouldn't have told that. But by this time, I think he ought to be over it. So that's just a fun story. But going back to, we moved to Cypher Street on the Mill Village, and Mom and Dad's next door neighbor was a couple by the name of Wade and Bessie Wilson. Well, Wade had a relative, and I don't know how they were related. I don't know the relationship, but he was related to Wade. His name was Rass, and that's the only name I've ever heard, no last name. Nobody's ever told me anything about him that I paid attention to other than he worked in the mill. He was about 19 years old. And we went to church at the Baptist church, which probably would have been about 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 blocks from where we lived. Well, it was summer when we first moved there, spring. And Mom would get me ready for church first because I was the baby. And then she would get my sister, who was 2 years old. She'd get her ready. And then she would get my brother ready, who was 4 years old. And Rass would come over. When she would get me ready, Rass would come over and play with me and keep me busy, try to keep me from getting dirty while she's getting my sister ready for church. She'd get her cleaned up and ready to go to church. Then she'd get my brother ready, and then we'd be ready to go. And when we left, Ras would carry me. My dad would carry my 2-year-old sister. My mom was sick when I was first born. I never remember my mom lifting me, even as a toddler. As I got older, I don't ever remember my mom picking me up. And I asked my older brother just the other day, and he said he didn't remember. Um, but that's another story too. Um, but on the way to church, Ras would, as he carried me, he would play with me and entertain me. And Ras, a man that I don't ever remember seeing in my life, as we would walk up to El Memorial Baptist Church, he pinned the name Dugan on me. And that's what my parents have always called me. That's what my brothers and sisters, that's what all my family, for the most part, not totally. It's interesting. I got a first cousin that I went to school with. He always called me Luther. He's always, to this day, he calls me Luther. Um, he's probably the only relative I've got that called me Luther, but he called me, we spent more time in school together than any other. But then, um, and I've never met Ras. Don't ever remember seeing him. I was too young to remember him when I did see him. And that's how I got the name Dugan.
Well, that's pretty neat. What I think is pretty neat too, Wade and Bessie,
Betsy.
uh, Wilson, that were neighbors back when you were a baby. Uh, After grandmother and granddaddy retired and Wade and Bessie retired years later, they were neighbors again right next door. And they rented a house. Where was it then?
On Hubbard. No, what Hubbard Street was. It may have been Hubbard. I don't remember.
Yeah. But I lived with them a little bit that time. I don't know if it was one summer in between, like summer vacation.
That was in the mid-90s too, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And back then, when I got the name Dugan, was in 1945.
Yeah. So I thought it was cool that they were neighbors when they were young, and then neighbors again, and
40 years later.
yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I had heard you tell that story about Raz, Wade's relative, naming you Dugan, and I got to meet Wade and Bessie. So I thought that was cool. All those years later. All right, Dad. So your nickname, I've heard you call Grandmother Johnson the master of nicknames, and I think your family is notorious for nicknames. You want to share a few other nicknames that are in your family? Okay.
I'm not sure if I should start with my generation or the generations before me, but I think I'll start with mine because I'm more familiar with them. Well, I'm Dugan, but I'm going to start at the oldest one. My dad and his brother Herb married sisters, who was my mom, that my dad married, and my Uncle Herb married my Aunt Bob. And yeah, you heard that right, Bob, B-O-B. And they got married in the same year, 1940. Though my Uncle Herb and Aunt Bob are both younger than my mom and dad, they got married in January of 1940. My mom and dad got married in June of 1940. Then in February of 41, January 1941, my cousin Barbara Ann was born. And then in April, my brother, who was Fred Lee Sewell II, was born. Well, at the time, I don't even know if you know this or not, Joe. My dad and Uncle Herb and my mom and my Aunt Bob, they lived in the same house. When my cousin Bonnie was born, they lived in the same. They shared the same 4-bedroom house.
I didn't know that.
And my dad saved Bottie's life one time.
Mm-hmm.
She got choked on something one night, and apparently everybody just froze. And my dad was asleep, and the excitement woke him up, and he grabbed my cousin Bottie by one leg, I think, and hit her in the back with his fist and dislodged whatever it was. It was hung in her throat, was keeping her from breathing. And so they had a bond as long as my dad lived. Well, for more than one reason, because we were so close and so tight. But anyway, let's get back to the nicknames. When Bottie was born, for some reason, my Aunt Bob wanted her to call my brother, which was her, they were double first cousins rather than brother and sister, but she wanted to call him brother. So as she's trying to teach a little one brother, it didn't come out brother, it came out Bub. So the adults thought, hey, that's a cute name, so we're going to name him Bub. So Fred became Bub. Well, then my mom was going to teach my brother to call my cousin by her name. Lo and behold, Barbara Ann. Well, Barbara Ann came out Bottie. So that's where those two names came from. And then I told you about my name, how I got Dugan, but my sister, her name was Juanita. She was named Harriet Juanita. Harriet is after our great grandmother, my mom's grandmother. She wanted to name her Harriet after her. And my dad liked the name Juanita. So they named her Harriet Juanita. And they decided they'd call her Juanita. But that didn't come out Juanita either. It didn't come out Nita. I mean, you'd think Nita sounded like a good name, but no, it wasn't. It was Neener. So I got a brother Bub and a sister Neener and a cousin who's female named Bottie. And she went through high school, and we all calling her Bottie. And she dated a guy almost all the way through high school named Donald Wayne Burnside. But Donald Wayne, guess what? He had a nickname too. His nickname was Baldy. And everybody in high school knew who Bottie and Baldy were. But then along come Faye 10 months after me. Guess who doesn't have a nickname? My cousin, my double first cousin, Faye. Only one out of the 5 of us. And we traveled as a gang of 5 when we were young. And her sister, Bottie, and her dad called Faye Whitey because she was a towhead when she was born and was always a blonde on up to adult. But one time my Aunt Bob called, I guess, a family meeting and told Bottie and Uncle Herb that they couldn't call her Whitey anymore. They had to call her by her name. I don't know why that was so important then, but I guess in 1946 it was nicknames were the thing of the past. But she went by Faye. She's the only one of the 5 of us don't have a nickname. Then, my mom's younger brother and younger sister, that's a good one too. My Uncle Gravy, he was born, I'm going to just tell you the legal names he went under, the aliases, I guess. He was born, it was James Edward Johnson. Now, I believe I'm telling you right. If not, it makes a good story anyway. He was born and named James Edward Johnson. But the time he started school, 5 years old, it's time to change names. They named him David Glenn Johnson. Then he got 17 years old. He dropped out of high school, pursued a career in plumbing, pipe fitting, steam fitting, and made a good living at it too over his lifetime. But for some reason, he changed his name back to James Edward Johnson. But his brothers and sisters called him David Glenn, the name that he started school with. And then when Bobby and Bub were born in 1941, when they were learning to talk, David Glenn came out as Gravy. So I've had an Uncle Gravy all of my life. And a character that fits the name Gravy. He was a great uncle. He always was picking on somebody, telling jokes and things. But then his sister, who was just older than him, when she was born, they named her after my grandmother's sister, Ida, and maybe after my grandmother's sister-in-law, Beatrice, and they named her Ida Beatrice. But by the time she was 5 years old and started school, no, let's name her Henrietta. So everybody called her Henrietta. 1941 comes by. My cousin Bobby, my brother Bub are born. Henrietta was renamed as Hinky. Now, my Aunt Hinky, I had an Aunt Hinky all my life, and she, her brothers and sisters called her Hink or Hinky. Grandmother and granddaddy even called her Hinky. Now, the interesting thing about my Uncle Gravy, grandmother and granddaddy never called him Gravy. If my grandmother was mad at him, she'd call him David Glenn. And granddaddy may have called him David Glenn once in a while, but I don't remember him ever calling him. Most of the time, when grandmother and granddaddy was talking about Gravy or talking to Gravy, his name was Boy, B-O-Y. And we knew who he was if one of them said Boy did this or did that or didn't do something, we knew it was Uncle Gravy. So let me see. I can't think of any other right now. I'm sure there were others. And if not, some of the real names were just as good as nicknames, but I guess I can get into that another time.
All right, well, there is how Luther became Dugan and some other interesting nicknames in his family. I hope you've enjoyed today's story, and if you do, please hit the like button, and we hope you'll subscribe and come back and visit. We hope to see you again and tell you some more tales.
Now, can I add one footnote to this, Jill?
Sure.
There are people, I'm 80 years old almost, there are people that have known me most all my life that only knows me as Luther. They know nothing about Dugan. There are also people that have known me most of my life. They have no idea about Luther. They just know me as Dugan. So it's interesting. So listen, y'all be pretty, and I'll see you on the next time, hopefully. Bye-bye.